All right. Who loves more about alcoholism? Me too. Chapter 3, page 30, for all of you that are wondering, that is where we are, and this is my favorite page in this entire book. But I'm going to start reading and explain to you why. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think that he is bodily or mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were gaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period of time, we get better, worse, never better. There's a lot of information. I'm going to stop right there, Bill. A lot of information right there. Okay. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. How many people in this room tonight? How many people? I want to see some hands on Zoom. And I don't know if I can see the prison people, but I'm going to ask you, how many people took more than the first time to admit that they were the real deal? Yeah, there's a lot of hands everywhere. I see you, all of you, and I see all of you. Thank you. And the next sentence, no person likes to think he's bodily or mentally different from his fellows. Isn't it a strange and really it's kind of an irony, which is really cruel, that that's the same reason I started drinking in the first place. Anyone relate to that? I didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I fit in. I felt different from my fellows. I felt alone in a room full of people, and I found that drinking helped. And it became my solution. And now at the end of my drinking, what's kept me for 27 years from getting sober was that I could not surrender to the fact that I was different. I was an alcoholic. Damn it, I've got to do this thing and read this book and hang out with these people. Shit. That was a hard thing to admit for me. How about you guys? Anyone? Show of hands? Yeah? Yeah, that's rough, right? So the fact that I couldn't do that is no surprise. In the next sentence, it says, it's no surprise that my drinking career was characterized by countless vain or failed attempts to prove that I could drink normally. We've already talked about that way of thinking, though, right? In the last chapter. That mental obsession, right? That obsession that tells me that it could be different on so many different levels. And that's the delusion that we're about to talk about again, because it's very, very important. This holds the key to me surrendering to my alcoholism, was recognizing that that actually was a delusion. That I did actually have to come to terms with being one of you guys. The idea that somehow, someday, I will control and enjoy my drinking was a great obsession. And it's a great obsession to every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this Illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. How many people have we lost in the last few years? Too many. That's right. Too many. Every week I hear of people dying. And me telling you that's not going to change how you use or drink. Frothy emotional appeal will not suffice, right? But it's the truth. We end up in asylums. We end up not as much in asylums anymore, like the old days, because that's all they had back in those days. Now we have detoxes and we have treatment facilities. And yeah, sometimes we end up in the psych wards, for sure, in the hospitals. And sometimes we die. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. That sentence alone, I have a story to tell you about my good friend Billy here. And one of the reasons he and I are close friends today is that he read this book, some of it with me, and not all of it, because he was just being a friend. He wasn't being my sponsor, but every once in a while we'd talk about things out of this book, and he always had time for me, this guy. That's why we're such close friends today. We spent a lot of time talking about this stuff. And, he said, Gord, I love that sentence. What do you think the most important word? And I don't know, man, I was 9 months sober or something like that. And he said, what do you think the most important word in that sentence is? And I said, I don't know, man. Maybe fully concede, because I could wrap my head around that. I had to surrender, fully concede. I had to get honest with myself, if you will, which is the principle behind step one, honesty, right? It had nothing to do with me being honest with any of you and everything to do with me getting honest with myself, right? That I was different, that I was mentally and bodily different from my fellows. That's a hard concession. But we've already talked about that. And Bill said, no, I think that learned's the most important, especially for a guy like you, Gord. Learned. You had to learn to concede to your innermost self. How many years did you spend doing this thing? 27. Yeah. And you finally sobered up, right? How did you learn? He said to me. You remember this? Mm-hmm. I tell this to every one of my sponsees. Every one of them have heard this story, right? He said, well, it told me just a couple sentences before that. You learned by countless vain attempts to prove that we could drink like normal people. It failed every single time. And through failure and pain, I learned. And I finally came to a place, and fortunately, by the way, I lived to get there. But I finally came to a place where I could come to terms with being different. And that putting alcohol or drugs in my system was never, ever again going to be an option for me. Now, people in certain rooms actually hate it when I say this. They really do. There are people that despise when I say this. But at this point in this book, I had to come to terms that this was a lifetime thing for me. I could never, ever again in my life safely drink or use. That's heavy. It's heavy. But until I got to that point, there was no way that I was going to be able to stay sober. Now, I get it, one day at a time, all that. Nowhere in this book does it say, by the way, one day at a time. I haven't read it anyway. Have you? Has anyone read one day at a time in this book? Me either. But we also understand, how difficult a lifetime seems. So we get there a day at a time. And I understand that concept. And I understand being there for each other every day, a day at a time. And we get there. But until I can come to terms that I can't do this anymore, I was unable to sober up completely. And I was unable to be willing to do whatever these guys told me to do to actually get recovery. Not just sobriety, recovery. A design for living, if you will. This delusion that we are like other people that can have a sip of wine and put it down And then that goes to waste sitting there. I never got that. My wife does it all the time. It pisses me right off to this day. I'm like, what are you doing? It's such a waste. I have to smash that delusion because I'm not that guy. I can never be that guy. And some days it's harder than others. I still get moments where I'm like, maybe when I retire, I'll smoke a little grass with my wife. No, you won't, dummy, right? God, show me someone to help, please, right? And it's gone right away because I have a higher power. That's my solution. I have a power that's greater than me. I have a God that helps me in those moments, right? But it's real. It still happens to me. We alcoholics are men and women who've lost the ability to control our drinking. Well, of course. That's why we're here. Our life blew up. Consequences, right? It sucks. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. And I love this next part. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story of myself, and then I'll pass it on to you, okay? I came from the streets, Maine and Hastings. I did some prison time. And when I got out of prison, I was at her again and I was doing my thing. And I decided, that I'd had enough. I was going down the same road. I got freaked out, saw my buddy go down and that was nothing unusual for the lifestyle, right? It was nothing new, but I saw it happen. And this time it made me think to myself, God, I just don't want to do this anymore. And so guess what? I called my mother who lived here. And I said, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just got out of prison. I am just doing the same shit and I don't want to do it anymore, but I don't know how to stop. And I know that I need help. I need a hand up. And she said, you know what? I'm going to think about this. I'll call you back in a couple minutes. Oh, that was like the gates of hell closed on me with a clang, I'll tell you. That was the longest couple minutes of my life. And she did call back and she refused to send me money. Smart. She finally smartened up, my mom. She's a really intelligent woman eventually. But she learned about not co-signing my bullshit. She sent me a plane ticket though and said there'll be some rules, but if you want to come here, go back to school and start changing, then I will give you a hand up. You can come and live with me. And so I did, and I went and bought some dope and and took it with me, and magically I lost that on the plane for somehow, maybe God, I don't know, looking back. But anyway, I got to Calgary, and I decided when I got to Calgary that I didn't need this stuff. I was just going to do it on my own, that I had enough self-knowledge, and I was, a young man, I had enough willpower. I was going to do this thing on my own, and I knew I was just insecure, okay? So I was going to create goals for myself, and I was going to achieve them, and I think that with every goal I achieved, I would raise my self-esteem, and I would get better, all on my own. And you know what? I'd be a liar if I didn't tell you that it didn't. It worked. I went back to college. I started getting 90%. I won awards for grades in college at ABC. I don't know if you guys remember that place. I think it's Bow Valley now, but it was back then. It was Alberta Vocational. I was winning awards. I met my future wife in college, and I got a job. There's this thing called the Yellow Pages for you young people. Yeah, no problem. It's this big yellow book, and that's how we got jobs back in the days. And I opened it up to construction, and I started at A, and I got a job at California Concrete. So took a few pages, but I got there. So I felt better about myself. And then I got, we had kids and bought houses, and I got a career. And you know what? I kept it on the tracks for a lot of years. I became very successful. And I mean very successful. And eventually, more and incomprehensible demoralization occurred. And I pulled it all down upon myself eventually. when things got hard enough, my daughters turned into teenagers, and I'd been riding this maintenance program for years. I probably could have bounced along the bottom, unhappy and not really present in all of their lives, for years. But somehow I got turned on to the wrong thing at the wrong time, and within 2 years, I just completely demolished my entire life. At times, we felt we were gaining control. Sometimes it looked really good. So now I've told you the story about me. I thought I regained total control. It was all just bullshit. I thought I white-knuckled it, and I was probably unhappy a lot of that time, and I probably made the people around me. I did make the people around me unhappy because of it, right? But it's very true for me. And I wanted to use that as a very vivid example of how we think that we can regain control, like that this thing's not, we know better, only to pull it all back down on ourselves. And I can tell you, the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization is absolutely true. I had never suffered like that, and I'd been on Main and Hastings. I had never suffered like I did this last time. So I was in the grip of a progressive illness, and although I didn't use for a lot of those years, so with my DOC, it kept getting stronger and stronger. You ever hear that saying, my disease is out in the parking lot doing push-ups? Have you heard that saying, guys? Yeah? Yeah, now I get it, right? I get it. At that point, I got it. It's like, yeah, this thing just keeps getting harder and harder. And if I take the chance, it could take me out. So yeah, I lost my legs and they weren't growing back, and I had to surrender finally. And I'll tell you something, the beautiful thing is that when I finally did, I was able to get involved and be a part of this thing. And it took some time, but my life is far better now. But I'm going to give it to you now. I talked way too much in that first 3 paragraphs.
Okay, thanks, Gord. A couple things from the top. We're on the chapter More About Alcoholism. It's one of the most important chapters in the big book. We have the doctor's opinion describes the allergy. It's 95% about the allergy, which is one of the things that differentiates us and sets us apart. So the doctor's opinion is massively important. We just finished off There's a Solution, and it talks about the hopeless nature of the disease. And then this chapter is really important because this is the chapter that shows you what type of thoughts go through your mind right before you pick up the drink. What type of thinking precedes the first drink. And not only that, it's like this is the chapter that shows you why the fuck you need God in your life. And this is the chapter that'll show you, if you've had a theory of God in your life, why it didn't fucking work. Anyone had God in their life and then they drank? Okay. Does anyone understand when I say the theory of God will not keep you sober? Is there anyone that doesn't understand that? Okay, that's good. Okay, so, and this is why we need God, right? So I'm not going to rehash a lot of what Gord talked about, but I will, the learned part. We learned we had to fully concede. And like earlier in the There's a Solution chapter, when Carl Jung was talking with Roland Hazard, and Roland Hazard said to Carl Jung, dude, you got to fucking help me, man, please. And Carl Jung says, dude, I got nothing for you. You're one of those. And he's like, I'm one of what? You're one of those hopeless alcoholics. The methods I employ work for a lot of people, but they don't work for you guys. And then he said, other than this thing that I've heard about called a vital spiritual experience, you're pretty much fucked, bro. And he's like, well, what is the vital spiritual experience? And then we talked about it at the end of last session. The ideas, emotions, and attitudes that are the guiding forces of our lives have to be exposed and cast aside. The old brain will always drink again. The old brain will always use again. The old brain will always seek relief again. And even if you get a bit of sober time, you haven't had a psychic change. And the book talks about there is very little hope of your recovery without the psychic change. That's really important. Why? Because the brain still needs the relief that it needs. Gord, at some point, couldn't do it anymore, and he drank again. because the things that filled his ego, where he got enough relief to give him a number of years, it wore off. So the ego and its relief will wear off. My story is almost identical, but way different. I quit drinking at 22. I picked up crack at 36. I fucking built a business and had shiny things and bought a lot of stuff in between quitting drinking and smoking crack. But when that stuff wears off too, I'm still stuck with the same fucking brain. And it says, what's giving you relief? What's always giving you relief? Boom. Then I don't have the power to say no. And I will pick up again, right? And I did. And then my spree was 6 years, 7 years long. And then that's what brought me here. But that whole time where I was like miserable in my untreated alcoholism days, seeking like shiny things and, you know, doing like shady shit and whatever, my family suffered the brunt of my untreated alcoholism because I treated it with alcohol, then I treated it with stuff and money. But my family endured like my anger and my fucking, you know, walking on eggshells and my restless, irritable discontent that was still there. They endured that. But eventually I couldn't take it anymore and crack cocaine became my next solution. So how did we learn? We had to fully concede to our innermost self. Countless vain attempts. How many detoxes you've been in? How many treatment centers you've been in? How many fucked up relationships you've been in? You know, how many DUIs you've been in? How many, like look at your record. And I know treatment centers do this. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I don't care what treatment centers do. I'm a fan of the big book and going through the first 4 chapters of step 1 to really concede to my innermost self. Because if I go through these 4 chapters at the beginning of the book, then I'll know the gates of hell will close on me with a clang. And I'll concede to my innermost self. That's really how I learned. Because I could look at the other things, you know, like all the pain that I caused and where I'd end up and how many times and blah, 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 you know, detoxes, treatment centers, although I never went to a detox. I could add up all that. But really where I conceded was when I finally went through this stuff. And that's what step 1 is designed to do. It fucking makes you fucking realize you're fucked. But you may never do step 1 and you will never know and understand what it is to be an addict or alcoholic. You will think you do because you go to meetings and Johnny puts up his hand, so fucking Mary puts up her hand, and I'm an alcoholic because fucking it sounds the same. No, man. The problem with the program is there's a lot of people in the program that aren't alcoholics or addicts. They're heavy drinkers. And if you're a heavy drinker or a heavy user or a moderate drinker user and you cause yourself a little bit of hassles in your life someday, but that's enough to drive you, well, the only requirement is the desire not to drink or use. So you're allowed here. But for me to fucking take the same message or program that the heavy drinker, moderate drinkers doing, I'm a fucking dead man. So we got to make sure we know what we are, right? And if I just keep guessing what I am, I will never understand that I don't actually pick up the first drink. Any alcoholic or addict in here who knows their disease knows that you don't fucking choose the drink. It chooses you. But you won't know that unless you go through the material. And once it chooses you, then you'll understand you're fucked because you will go on the spree. But if you don't understand that, you will always think that you picked up. And then what happens? More guilt, more shame because you did it again. And you hurt more people again and again and again and again. And you're like, I'm such a piece of shit. I make such bad choices. No, bro, you don't understand your fucking illness. But once you understand, then you'll be ready to do what it takes, right? So just quickly moving down, no real alcoholic ever recovers control. He never recovered control. I never recovered control. You know, all of these different times where I couldn't safely use, and maybe the one time I did safely use, I'm like, fuck, I'm not an addict. I didn't end up somewhere wherever, right? But that's how we work too. Yeah, no, I'm not an addict alcoholic. I fucking used. I went home. I went to bed. I did it 3 nights in a row, actually. I don't know if I need you guys. Fucking out of here. Anyway. So anyway, let's keep going. over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never fucking better. We are like men who have lost their legs. We never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, still followed by always still a worse relapse. Sparkles, you relate? We all relate. I don't know why you came to mind. I can edit that out if you want. Physicians, I just love your honesty in your stories, right? I've known you for a few years and like you come to the room and you're fucking honest. You tell the truth and you say it like it is, and then they always get worse, right? And so that's all I'm saying, because I know you. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree that there's no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. Despite everything, some of us will still not believe it. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule. Therefore, non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing the inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. And I've had many people in the program say, I'm not really sure. And I'm like, dude, fucking take my hat off. Give her. Or you don't want to be at the program, do whatever you want to do. I fucking totally understand if people don't want to be here and you don't want to do the work. I accept anybody to do however they want to do it. But at things like this, I'm going to tell the truth, right? But if somebody says, you know what, I think you guys are full of shit and I don't know if I really need to be here, I fucking honestly wish you the best of luck. My hat's off to you. The chances are, I'll see you in 2 fucking years back here. That's the reality of my life. A lot of you guys know me. You know how I am. And I say the shit that I say. And anyone here not like me when they first met me? Okay. Quite a few. Let's get honest here.
Come on, Zoomers. Let's see your hands.
Or did I scare you or whatever? Right? So, but what I've seen happen over the years is a lot of people that don't really want to hear what I got to say, or they get offended, or they just don't like me. Eventually, 2 or 3 years later, they're asking me for help in some regard. And one of the things I teach the people like us and my sponsees who we work with alcoholics and addicts is predict their future. So I predict a lot of futures, and I'm like, this is probably what'll happen. I wish you the best. I hope that, you leave here and you go to college and you marry that woman and things are good. But if not, if you end up back here in 2 years, come talk to me. So in 2 years, he's like, dude, fucking lost my wife and college went to shit and I'm on the streets in the alley over here. I'm like, oh, no way. Fuck.
No shit.
Then I'm like, yeah, I can help you. And what works well at that point is because you've predicted their future, and it all came out of this fucking thing, and experience through sponsorship. Then you get someone that's willing, right? Now you can really give them the goods, and then they'll really see that you care, and that's really the main point, I guess. Okay, let's keep going. Our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms, sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum. So some of the things that I tried was I would leave my crack at home and go to work. Or I wouldn't I swore I wasn't going to do it in the office, or I'm just going to do it by myself, or whatever. Every single thing where I tried to control and enjoy or moderate it or control it, I failed on every fucking angle. And eventually, everything that I tried, to moderate with didn't work. And like the reason I talk a little bit about the drugs here is because this is all about alcohol, but druggies will do crazy shit. Like I fucking remember putting it in different pockets of my clothes in the closet. And then when I was out or desperate and I always forgot shit, I would go and look in all my clothes, right? And then I wouldn't find it until I sobered up. Or whatever, right? Or I hide it under like the stupidest places, like at the corner of the bedpost, or under the lamp, or like, fuck, man.
I think we call that tweaking.
Yeah, it was a bad existence. We do not like to pronounce any individual alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take you long to decide if you are honest with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of the jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. So really what this is, it's the first method that the big book gives you to prove if you're an alcoholic. So it's trying to say, here's a way that you can prove if you're an alcoholic. And it's telling you, go and step over to the nearest bar and try some controlled drinking. And I have given people money to go try this and say, here, I'll start you out with $20. And then it won't take you long if you decide for yourself whether you're an alcoholic. Anyone tried to, just have a hit of crack to take the edge off? Just one, right? How's that work? Aaron?
It doesn't take the edge off, does it?
It doesn't work, right? Like a drink, right? It's made for the book is about drinking, but it's the same shit, right? It's the same shit, really. So this is the first way to try to prove if you're a real deal alcoholic or addict. Though there's no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there's time. So it's saying we all could have probably stopped at some point, but we had no desire to stop at that point. That's why younger people, it's harder for them to get it because it's just not as bad yet. We have heard few instances where people who show definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period of time because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here's one. This is called the carpet slipper story. This is the carpet slipper guy. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning, and after these bouts, he quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed at business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business, Gord, and retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man. He remained bone dry for 25 years, and retired at the age of 55. After a successful and happy business career, then he fell victim to the belief, which practically every alcoholic addict does, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came the carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital in the meantime. Then, gathering all of his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found that he could not. Every means of solving his problem, which money could buy, was at his disposal. Yet every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly, and he was dead within 4 years. That's my story, in a sense. I quit at 22. I started again at 36. In between, I did smoke weed, I did do acid, and I did do mushrooms. But I figured I was pretty much sober.
Yeah.
So this case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us believe that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could therefore drink normally. But here's a man who at 55 years found that he was where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in short time as bad as ever. If we're planning to stop drinking, this is important for the newer people. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind. Any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. So I'm going to stop there and I'm just going to say a little piece and I'll turn it over to Gord. So, no reservations. So the honest truth is when I first came in here, I had reservations. I did. I didn't really think the book was going to work. Like, I fucking hated big book thumpers. I would go to PPG and I would see these big book thumpers and I just thought, you fucking extremists, right? And they would always talk about the book and all this shit. And I'm like, just talk about your life, man. Just talk about your life. Like, fuck, don't be like that. Anyway, how things change. But I had a lurking notion, and I've worked with many guys at the beginning of the journey. They had a lurking notion that maybe they could use again. But what I found through the step one process and how the rest of the steps after step one worked, but the step one was like, it helped them see the disease and it helped them see like, fuck, I can't do this again. So the lurking notion slowly gets chipped away. And then when they get to the, step 2, 3, 4, and 5, it's almost everything's changed and they want to stay sober. Did anyone come in here and have a lurking notion or not really sure, and then you did the steps and everything changed? Chris, Archie, where are you? Can you run it to Chris? He's right at the back. There was a lot of people put up their hand, but we'll go with Chris. Chris, can you describe to everybody like what I just said? Coming in, maybe not really wanting to quit or not, and then you did the steps and kind of what happened and your sobriety now and all that shit. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Archie.
Well, for me, it took me 2 attempts into treatment, and first time into treatment, I went in basically because I was trying to get the heat off, but I always in my head still thought I had control over it. 3 months into treatment, I thought it would be a good idea. I was going to have one hoot to crack, and I was going to go back to treatment, right? And then 2 years in between the second trip to treatment, I was defeated. But when I still went to treatment, I still had the lurking notion that I was, my problem was crack, and I was not an alcoholic, right? Turns out after coming here and doing the steps and working through the program, that's my problem. I'm an alcoholic. Right. And so that was what I had to smash that idea. And it's been almost 16 years now, right, that I haven't drank alcohol because I smashed that lurking notion. But it took me a while. Right.
And that's really important for addicts because there's a lot more addicts in the world today. And what Chris is saying, and it's a great point, is being an addict, we think that we're not really alcoholics. But we suffer a spiritual malady that he was medicating regardless what the substance was. But because the fellowships are specific to like NA is drugs and AA is alcohol and CA is all of it. So CA's kind of got it all covered, but NA does too, because it's all about alcohol too. But in our minds, we think that, yeah, I'm a druggie. I'm not an alcoholic. But as he went through the material, I think he realized he is an alcoholic. But really what you realized, can you give him back to Mike, Arch? He realized that you have a spiritual malady and doesn't matter what the substance is, hey?
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chris. So that's all I got, Gord.
Okay. I'm not a big believer in giving a guy $20 and sending him over to the bar to do some drinking because, that shit'll kill us nowadays. That's going to kill us, right? I mean, for me, that would kill me. So remember that this book was written in the 30s, right? And there were less of us drug addicts, right? So, and there certainly wasn't fentanyl that was killing people, right? So easily. So we got to be really careful with that. I know, Bill, you talk about that, but Bill definitely was good for me, like he would call me and, hey, Gordy, you want to go to a meeting and meet for coffee beforehand? And I'd be like, yeah, sure, man. And I'd smoke a bowl right before I went into the Tim Hortons, and I'd be like, what? Hey, what's going on? And he'd ask me, how you doing, man? And I'd say, oh yeah, things are great. Things are great. And in that moment, he knew that I was not ready yet. Right. And so there's no point in Bill wasting his time trying to possibly wreck a future opportunity to help me. Right. He knew in that moment. But what I'm not sure if he did know was just the fact that he called every once in a while meant the world to me. Because I was one of those guys that suffered the relapse. Like I was one of those guys that people quit talking to at the end of the meeting, right? There's no point in talking to that guy. He's never going to get it, right? I know it's hard to believe, right? Looking at me, but I'm full of piss and vinegar today, you know what I mean? But I was one of those guys people just wouldn't talk to because they didn't think that I'd ever have a chance. But people like Bill, people like my sponsor, they kept coming up to me. So are you done yet? And I wouldn't be done yet. And that was the reality, Oh yeah, I'm doing fine. We'll give it another go. Yeah. But they knew I wasn't done yet because I hadn't hit that level. I want to talk about, because we talked a lot about the alcohol and changing from whiskey to beer and all of that stuff. But I'm going to talk about how about moving from Vancouver to Calgary? Because, those people aren't as crazy as the Vancouver people. And I won't know anyone, so I won't be able to get high. I mean, doing some casual labor right out of the gate at some labor force company, and I found a guy that had a lot of, like, it was that easy, and I fell back into that. It's like he was saying, we have that spiritual malady, and we will do whatever it takes to medicate that, really. I have tried to only smoke that first bowl in the morning of crack, because it's really the only one I get high on in the day, right? So let's try that. That never seemed to work out for me. I'm not really sure. I just continued smoking it for the rest of the day. Here's one that some of you may have tried. I'm only going to crush up an Oxy 80 on Monday and snort one, and then I'm not going to do another one until Thursday, and that way I won't get physically dependent on it, and I should be able to keep using. Right? Has anyone tried that? Anyone? Can anyone relate to that? There's not a lot of Zoomers.
Gilbert's like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few people here too. That's good. I'm not the only one, so I'm glad to hear that because I thought I was pretty crazy for a while. I've done so many things. Ad infinitum really spells it out. It can go on and on and on, and all that means is that how many of these plausible excuses, like we discussed in the last chapter, how many of these plausible excuses that follow the insane thought? I'm just going to remind you of the insane thought. What is it? That I can have a drink or a drug. That's right. I wasn't going to pass the microphone for that quick answer, guys. But yeah, that's the insane thought, that I can drink or I can do a drug. And it's followed by all these plausible excuses ad infinitum. It go on and on and on. It's whatever it takes. And basically all that it means is I'm not ready to stop. I'm not ready to stop. Bill asks, like, how many of you, had these lurking notions that you would use again when you first sobered up? All of us. Because we had no idea what recovery looks like. We had no idea what this life could be. And for some of us, that holds true today. And it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. And yeah, I still get those incoming thoughts occasionally. You know what I mean? But they're supplanted very easily. Like they're just gone very, very quickly now. And that's because I found a higher power, which we're going to get into the next chapter, right? We're going to start talking about that soon. Because that's the solution here. But until I recognize that I have absolutely zero hope without it, I can't find it. Mm-hmm. And that's why we go into such great detail in these chapters. And this one specifically really starts hammering it home. This is fucking insane, people. You are powerless. When Bill says that first drink doesn't choose you, or you don't choose it, it chooses you, is 100% accurate. We've lost the power of choice. We discussed that already. But I love this chapter because we get to talk about all the stuff we just spent 3 weeks talking about over again, really quickly and really firmly. You see what I'm saying? This brings us home. I did the set of steps. I found this relationship with a higher power. All of a sudden, the spiritual malady starts to be relieved with something other than drugs and alcohol. The lurking notions start to dissipate. And no, not all at once. I'd be a liar if I told you that the minute I finished my steps, I was free. That's bullshit. Maybe that's not bullshit for other people, but for me, that would be bullshit. It took me years of going through this, cleaning up the past, continuing to work on my defects of character. Hell, it's probably still happening now. I just don't get these lurking notions very often. I don't get them. And when they do come in really quickly, they're gone. And I go about using the spiritual toolkit. I look to my pillars, my friends, my sponsors, my meetings, and more importantly, my sponsees. I help people. And that's why I was put on this earth today. You know, that's what recovery is. What it looks like in rewards, I don't know. But it's pretty fucking good so far. You know, it's pretty good so far. Excuse my language. I don't ever swear. I don't know. You're rubbing off on me, bro.
Jesus Christ.
You know? Yeah. So I think that's it, man. We can move on, right?
Arch, you got something going back there? Okay. Okay. So before we shut it down for break, I'm hoping we can get through this whole chapter tonight. Looks like we're on track to do that. Does anyone have any questions before we shut it down and have smoke and coffee? Okay. We'll see you in 15.
Wait. Anyone on Zoom have
Anyone
any
on
questions?
Zoom?
No?
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll get back to the podcast in a second. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the guest sharing or myself. We have no affiliation with any 12-step or recovery program. And if you do like our work, please consider visiting BILLWARDLIFE and supporting what we do. Now back to the podcast.
All right. We are still on page 33. Halfway down, young people. Young people may be encouraged by this man, this robust man who died in 4 years of retirement, right? They may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of this peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. Several of our crowd, men or 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking for 20 years. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantities some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a short number of years. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try and get them to see it. As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. If he's a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. It's not likely he will succeed, in other words. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. So that goes back to what Bill was saying, right? He learned to concede to his innermost self by going through the literature. I found that very profound just now, today, because I had never thought of it like that before. But it's absolutely true. That and the pain and the failure, right? A combination of all of those things. And that's really what it's talking about. When you were young, can anyone relate to giving her like, and it getting a little bad for a while, and you're like, oh, I got to stop. And then you stop, right? And you're like, okay, I'm just going to take a break. And then you take a break, and you're like, wow, okay, so I should be good to go again, right? And I don't know about you, but I even ended up in detoxes or treatment facilities when I was young. It got that bad. And I go through, weeks of program in these facilities. And in a short period of time, getting out of these facilities, and for some of us, it's like hours, I started thinking that a drink was a good idea again. And the thought of, maybe I was just young. Maybe I was just young back, a couple months ago. Young, and I've grown a little bit since then. I'm growing up now. I could probably drink again. And I always failed. But that's I think that's what it's talking about. When we're young, we feel like we're indestructible. But not only that, how many people here are parents and have had an active role in parenting children? Yeah, no offense to people that haven't, but those people know what it's like to watch a teenager think that they friggin' know everything, right? It's crazy. You can tell them the most absolute common sense stuff and say, don't do this because this is why, and it's perfect reasoning, and it's absolutely true and makes total sense, and they'll look at you and go, you're fucked. Not because you are fucked. It's because it's coming from you, and they're just not buying it. They got to make up their own decisions. And we all go through that. But I think that that's what it speaks to here. That's what we're talking about here. A scant chance of success, because there's still going to be time, because I don't think that I'm indestructible, or I think that I'm indestructible. I don't think that I'm beaten when I'm young. It's hard to learn that. I'm going to let you talk a little bit.
Okay. Lisa has a question. Anyway, so what I want to touch base on is the peculiar mental twists. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired. In this chapter, at the beginning of the chapter, I talked about why we need God. And a lot of the 12-step programs or the people in it believe that God is just this warm, fuzzy thing that I need in my life because it makes me feel good. When I'm depressed and I'm down, I can pray to this thing and I can feel a little better. That's not why we fucking need God. You will drink over and over and over if that's the kind of God that you have. We need God to combat the peculiar mental twist. And I think in the previous chapter, it talked about perhaps he doesn't think at all. And then as we move into these next two stories, Jim's story and Fred's story, people just read these stories. I know I did. When I first read the book, it was a guy named Jim. Here's a little story about Jim. Didn't really fucking mean anything. Oh, there's another story about this other guy named Fred. And then I read it and like, what a fucking stupid story. Why? But it took me a while to realize what these stories meant. And they're actually very profound stories. They actually tell you what thinking precedes the first drink. But unless you understand the literature and what they're saying, you will just think what I thought, like, fuck, oh, it's got a couple stories in here, Jim and Fred and the carpet slipper guy, and fucking, and I read that chapter. But once you understand the chapter and why it's here, you'll know why we need God. There's a reason why we need God. And like, just like in the Roland Hazard story where Roland said, fuck, Carl, okay, I believe in God. Great. Carl Jung said, no, bro, although your religious convictions are good, you believe in God, you have a theory of God, it does not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience that you fucking need to stay sober. And that kind of God, the theory God, it might work for a heavy drinker or a moderate drinker, but it will not work for us. How do we get God to work in and through us in our lives? Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our directions. If you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to follow directions. Further on, clear-cut directions are showing how we have recovered. If you had followed directions carefully, you will feel the flow of His Spirit into us. The book, the original manuscript especially, is full of the word directions. And so directions are the plan of recovery. The plan is the blueprint. You want to fucking get sober and stay sober, or emotionally sober? Because emotionally sober is where sobriety is at. Because then if you're emotionally sober, you don't need the fucking relief anymore, right? But it's about the processes. The processes are most important. And that's what this big book study is. And we're in the problem right now. So anyone here in the study, we're talking about the problem. I'm touching a little bit on defective character right now, but wait till we get into like the further chapters. That's the whole premise of the program, if you ask me, is identifying how we think, how we feel, what am I acting out in, what am I using to ideas, emotions, and attitudes to run my life. That's what we will really reveal in the step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9, I guess, and 10. Anyway, where'd you finish reading?
Weeks. I didn't,
Weeks?
but you
Okay.
should start at 4 of those.
Okay. And then this is the second
30.
method of trying to find out if you're a real alcoholic. So they give you the one where try some controlled drinking or drug using, try it more than once, won't take you long. This is the second one. Let them try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. Try to not drink or use for a year on your own with no fucking solution. Blaine, how's that work? Not well. The reason why I'm calling out Blaine is he came up to me right after the session was done. He's like, fuck, I remember you. Fucking like from like 4 years ago. You said this and that, and I'm like, he's like, I didn't need what you guys had. And then here he is.
I didn't need it.
He's the guy that I was talking about in the last session. He's right there, right?
Wait for the microphone. There we go.
I think my sponsor could tell even I was like, okay, so it's 2 hours. I'm out. I don't think I can do this. And then I came here, got to the door, and I'm here now.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Okay, so has anyone tried to stay sober 1 year on their own? Did it work, Robin? Bryn? Who else? Amanda? I've had many sober years. Right. Lucky?
A
Anyone online?
lot of hands on Zoom too.
Okay. So yeah, that's the thing. And like what I've seen is you're very unlikely to make it 2 years if you don't work a good program. 2 years is kind of the marker for me.
I stayed sober for 3 years once when I was young, and I was going to some meetings, but you know, I was just chasing girls and going to sober dances. It was fun for a little while. Didn't last. Yeah, sounds about right, eh? Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends to the extent which they have already lost the power to choose whether they will drink or not. I'm going to reread that, and then I'm going to flip it on something. Whether a person can quit on a non-spiritual basis depends to the extent which they have already lost the power to choose whether they will drink or not. So let's just say you got like 1 to 10 moderate drinker, and then once you pass over 10, then now you're a hard drinker. And now you have 1 to 10 hard drinker. And once you pass 10 on hard drinker, now you've entered into the alcoholic addict stage. And let's say you're a 1 alcoholic versus a 9 alcoholic. To the extent that you've lost the power of choose will depend on the spiritual remedy that you need for your solution. So moderate drinkers and heavy drinkers can get away with not doing what we do, and a 1 alcoholic and addict might not need as much as, say, a 9 or an 8 alcoholic addict. And earlier in the study, I talked about the depressive type of alcoholics. They're very difficult. They're more difficult to get sober, in my opinion, and this is why. Whether a person can quit on a non-spiritual basis depends to the extent which their ego already controls their life. How much pain, how much trauma, how much do you identify with the past? How much do you identify with the money, with the women, with the whatever? To whatever extent your ego is identified with you will need more God as well. Does that make sense? So some people can get away with doing a little less than others, which is, here nor there.
Lucky bastards.
But if we just, right? But if we follow the directions, irregardless, doesn't matter, we can all recover. And whether it's a 1 alcoholic or an 8 or a 9 alcoholic, the directions are the directions, and they're done every morning, all day long, and at night. All the things are the same. So if you're the real deal alcoholic, that's maybe a 9 or an 8 alcoholic addict, you will recover without issue if you follow the directions. If you just do what you want to do and just pray when you want to pray and do the things your way because you think you know is best or whatever, you will be beaten into a state of reasonableness through your defective character, through depression or anxiety, or your sex conduct will kick your fucking ass. Whatever it is will kick your ass. And you'll eventually need to do what we do around here. Okay. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism. So cunning, baffling, powerful. It's not really the substance that's cunning, baffling, and powerful. You're going to see later in this chapter, the main problem centers in my mind. My mind is fucking cunning. My instinct that drive my defects to character is powerful. And this is what it's saying. This utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish, alcohol or drugs. But it's also the defective character. What defective character do you have an utter inability to leave alone? Because it drives you from a place that you don't even know. And for most people, the defective character that takes them back to the drink is like the opposite sex. I need a relationship. I need sex. It's the women or the men. But really, it's a deep defective character that I'm trying to fill something within me from something outside of me, but it'll never fill it. And so that's what the steps do. And that's kind of like the design for living part of step 1. What is the utter inability that I have to leave alone women or porn or gambling or my anger? What am I powerless over? What am I putting in the alcoholic cycle when I'm restless, irritable, discontent? Right? What is it for you?
Mine was anger, for sure.
Yeah, and anger is a symptom, right? It's the umbrella. It's kind of like addiction. It's the umbrella. But under addiction is all the reasons why we're addicts. Anger is also an umbrella. There's all the reasons why I'm angry. A lot of those are my desires are frustrated. I'm not getting what I want, or I have an emotional need that I can never fill. And we'll get way more into that in step 4 and 6 and 7. But anyway, I'll just keep going. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render even a greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede the relapse into drinking. For obviously, this is the crux of the problem. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. This is why. What describing some of the mental states, what type of thinking precedes the relapse into drinking? For obviously, this is the crux of the problem. The allergy is not the problem. The problem is why do I put the first one into my body? What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink or hoot? Well, it's the first think. Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree, which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy, are mystified when he walks directly into the saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? You want to go before we start, Jim?
You know, I'm happy with everything you said.
Okay, take it over.
Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes Jim. Isn't that something? Everybody likes Jim and the business. Great family. War veteran, which was very respected back in those days. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. And in a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. Ooh. I don't know about you, but that would hurt my ego a little bit. Anyhow, he did it and seemed happy about it. Yeah, so all went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Now, that is the massive key that we're probably going to talk about. This entire thing for me is about enlarging on my spiritual life every single day. I don't take a break from it. I can't. I cannot afford to take a break from trying to learn and become more aware of what God's will is for me and how I can help people that come across me in my path every single day. I need to grow. I need to continue to grow. And if I don't, let's see what happened to Jim. Oh, I lost myself there. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, what?
It's terrible. Wow. Okay, so to his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He let go of where he was on the page. He agreed he was a real alcoholic in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had a deep affection. So Jim's reached a point. He's reached a turning point, right? Yet he got drunk again. Why would Jim do that? He knew he was going to lose everything, including this family for which he deeply loved. In the very next sentence, 5 words that I can relate to so bitterly deeply, yet he got drunk again. He lost the power of choice. He did not choose to drink. It chose him. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened, and this is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern or business that I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious, at least nothing serious to Jim. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. Almost sounds like he's coming up with plausible excuses already. He hasn't even thought of having a drink yet. Interesting. I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Now, I always found that a little odd. How many people go to a restaurant, order a meal, eat it, and then decide to order another one? Okay, there's one or two.
Of course.
Gluttony is a sin as well. No, I'm just kidding. But not many people do that though, right? So there might have been a reason that Jim was hanging around, right? He didn't know it at the time, but he was hanging around, and here it comes. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. That should be all right. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. But that didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. And thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go back. I mean, I see all sorts of red flags in this story. I love this story, right? It talks about a guy who lost his business. He talked to guys that 12-stepped him, and he was like, yeah, I need you guys, and this is awesome. And he tried to sing for a little while, and he started building his life, but he kept getting drunk. And then he tried to build it back. And then he took a job at this place where he used to own. That's a flag for me. Like, I mean, I think it's great that he'd do it, but I'm not sure I could ever do that. Honestly, that's a big hit to an ego. And when I first sobered up, my ego was massive. I don't think anyone could fit in this room with me, honestly. And that was one of the hardest things I had to beat, was my ego. You know, he went on and on. He got into an argument with his boss. He's resentful. He's irritated. Restless, irritable, and discontented. It's all in here. If you pick it out, right? That's irritable. And then very self-seeking and selfish. He's like, but it was nothing serious. Well, you just fought with your boss. Probably told him he was an asshole or something. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't like it when my employees do that to me. And it gets quite serious when they do that shit. But Jim, he's like, nah, nothing serious. There's a problem coming, right? This guy is unable to control his emotion. He's unable to control his thinking at this point already, and he hasn't even thought of having a drink. But I can see that he's well on his way. When we started reading this, Bill read, we need to look at the thoughts that precede the first drink. So that's why I'm talking to you about this. Irritability, restlessness.
Resentful.
He's resentful. His ego is bruised, so he's feeling sorry for himself. These are all defects of character. Fear in the form of self-pity for me is one of the worst defects of mine. And I'll tell you something, before I sobered up, if you would have told me I felt sorry for myself, I probably would have smashed you in the face. Not a joke. I probably would have struck you, right? And I'm not a really tough guy. I certainly haven't struck anyone in a very, very long time, but that's how I felt about that. Don't tell me I feel sorry for myself. What do you fucking think I am, right? And the truth of it is, when I sobered up and started working on this thing, it's my largest defect of character. So I am constantly feeling sorry for myself, even today. Even to today. It happens so naturally. I hate that about myself, but I'm working on it, but I have to be aware of it. It's very, very important that we're aware of it. And at this point, this guy has no clue. He has no clue. But all of these things are coming to light, and that's the thoughts that precede the first drink. That's why we don't have the choice, because we don't see self in ourselves. You understand what I'm trying to say? Am I saying this correctly? It is so hard for me to realize that I'm in self on my own, which is why today, we have step 10. I can call this guy, or I can call, my sponsor, I can call other pillars, and I can talk to them and say, man, I know there's a problem here, but I can't see it. Can you help me with this? Let's walk through it. And they help me walk it through. And I learned from doing the step 4 inventory how to do that. I learned how to look at what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it, who it's directed at, and then what is it affecting in my life? Is this a social thing? Is this a financial thing? Is this a sex thing? What is it? I got to learn. What is it affecting in here so that I can get to the root thing of what the fear is? Because they almost all come down to fear in some way or another. And almost is a stretch. I'd say they always come down to a fear. And if I can figure out what the fear is, I can start to figure out what my part is, and I can start to correct the behavior and ask for help for it, right? And I can't do it on my own, so asking for help part is really, really important in that. But at this point, Jim doesn't know how to ask for help because he doesn't even see it. Good night, David. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Anyone? I don't think there is any thinking. Is there? Yeah. I said, what thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink?
Self.
It's self. It's self. But I don't think it's actual thought. Like, they're not seeing it. They're not seeing it because it's self.
Okay, just a couple things back to the start. Second paragraph on page 35. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. So it's like, it's the program talking to Jim saying, telling him what we knew about the disease and the answer that we had found. But then it says he made a beginning. And if you know step 3 in this literature, after you do the step 3 prayer, it says this was only a beginning. So I'm assuming he made it to step 3. That's just what I'm assuming. Okay. And then as we kind of keep reading down in this sentence, his family was reassembled. A lot of people come into recovery and they go to meetings and they start the steps and everything kind of gets better. And, things come back, the job comes back and the old lady comes back and the kids come back. And then he began to work at a business he had lost through drinking, and all went well for a time. Everything always fucking goes well for a time. When you get back here and you're fucking desperate again. Anyone done the step 3, 1, 2, 3, shuffle, 1, 2, 3 drunk? Anyone do it like more than once, like many, many times? That's the thing, right? You can come in here and think that you that you can get to step 1, 2, and 3 and think that you're turning your will and your life over to God and you're so different and everything feels so good. The problem is you haven't exposed the ideas, emotions, and attitudes at step 3. Your ego can think that it's turned its will and its life over to the care of God, but you don't have a fucking clue what your will is until you do a fucking 4. And that's just the barest beginning. When I talk about cunning, baffling, and powerful, that part of understanding self and your will doesn't even come till you practice this a while. Most people, what they will do is they'll come in and then they'll, like I've talked about it before, self-will the principles in their affairs. The problem with self-willing the principles in your affairs is it's still based in self. To be willing to work for humility is something to be desired. Takes most of us a long fucking time. A whole lifetime geared to self-centeredness will not be set in reverse at once. Rebellion dogs are every step at first. So he made a beginning. So he has no psychic change, doesn't know what his will is. And then quickly, as we flip the page, and Gord really described it well, he's restless, irritable, discontent. The guy hasn't had a psychic change. He doesn't even know the beginning aspects of what the problem is. He thinks the problem is a drink, and he knew better. But he doesn't have the power of choice, so the drink chose him. He drank, and here we are. Why do we need God? Fucking suddenly. When suddenly? When is suddenly? Like, when's that going to happen in your drinking and using career? I don't know when suddenly is. But God can match the insane idea to pick up with the sane thought to not pick up. Whatever the precise definition of the word insanity may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such of a lack of proportion, me knowing all these things, me knowing I'm going to hurt my family, me even learning about the knowledge about this disease, to think straight, be called anything else? And I pick up with everything that I think I know. The theory of God will not keep you fucking sober. God has to work in and through us. So suddenly, right? The problem with Jim is he suddenly took the drink because he didn't have the choice, because he is spiritually unfit. And then he put one in him. And then, of course, he ordered another one. Because now the allergy takes over. He's no longer drinking to escape the malady that he took the first one for. He is now drinking to overcome a physical craving beyond his mental control. Thus started one more trip to the asylum for Jim. Because that's where it's going to take him. That's where it takes us. Takes us wherever it does. I always laugh in the meetings. Well, fuck, I know what's going to happen when I take the first drink. I fucking never knew what was going to happen. I don't know where I'm going to end up.
Scary.
I didn't really know where I was going to end up. I just knew. I thought I had control, that it was going to be different this time, and it never was. Okay, let's keep reading. You may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon that paralleled with our sound reasoning. The mental phenomenon of picking up the drink that parallels with our sound reasoning. There inevitably, almost always, ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check, and the insane idea won out. Remember the other day we were talking about, I'm just going to flip back. You guys can if you want. I think it was in There's a Solution. But what about the real alcoholic? Okay, on page 23, if you want to flip, you can. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, but he does. Thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Okay, skip down a couple lines. Oh no, not skip down. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses of why I drink or use drug have a certain plausibility. It makes some sense, I guess. You know, the wife was pissing me off, or the job, or, you know, whatever the reason is, it has a certain plausibility. But none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc of the alcoholic drinking bout creates. Doesn't really make sense when I really look at it thoroughly. But if you ask the guy and you push, it says here, couple lines down, if you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of the alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. That's what fucking happens. They don't want to talk about it. They'll become irritated, they'll become a little resentful, and then they're not calling you. And if you've ever sponsored somebody who is in this state, who has those reasons, that doesn't understand the disease, they ghost you. They don't want to hear that shit anymore. So they're irritated and they refuse to talk. And their excuse of why they went out is good enough for them, but they don't understand. And eventually they will understand. But this line, once in a while he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say it, he usually has no more of an idea why he took the first drink than you have. If he's willing to sit there and talk about this issue and why he drank with you long enough, he will come to the point where, I don't know why I did it. Because they don't know. We don't know. But once we realize that we don't have the power to choose, we realize that we didn't choose. Okay. Back to 37.
You may.
We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, about 10 lines down on 37. But there was always the curious mental phenomenon paralleled our sound reasoning, inevitably followed some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reason failed to hold us in check. Self-knowledge and your reasons to not drink will not hold you in check. Remember back in There's a Solution? At a certain point, the alcoholic has no effective mental defense against the first drink. When is the certain point that you won't be able to bring into your consciousness the memory, the pain, and the suffering of a day, a week, a month ago? I don't fucking know when suddenly's coming. That is suddenly. When? At a certain point. When's the point? I don't fucking know. And neither do you. These are the reasons I'm stating why we need God in our life. Not the theory of God, because God can become the effective mental defense. If God's a theory, all he is an effective mental defense that will one day give way for the insane idea that you should have the drink. So that's what I mean about the theory of God. The theory of God will not keep you sober. What does? Through the directions and the processes, you remove all the things that aren't God, and you can be able to get in touch with God. But you got to look at the ideas, emotions, and attitudes. And not doing the steps doesn't allow that. And you can say, well, I do my own inventory, or I'm really self-aware of myself. I. That's not enough. It's not an objective view. Your subconscious pride and ego will always rationalize and justify shit to fucking suit your actions or your inaction. The benefit of doing this work with somebody else is they've had experience and they can see right through your fucking shit. And the other thing about the steps and being sober is there's a level of sobriety. If you just stay sober on your own, and let's just say, I was talking with someone else about this today. Let's just say you get sober on your own and you're like, oh, fuck, I'm good. I'm just going to keep busy. I'm going to set the goals. I'm going to do these things and build my own self-esteem. Okay, great. Maybe it works for you. And then your happiness is like a 50%. And you think that happiness is happy as you can get. That's as vital, that's as beautiful as life's going to get. It's 50%. The problem is you don't know there's 50% more that you don't know about, that you will never know about, because the steps clear that channel so that life becomes fucking rich and the feelings become felt and love becomes like real, something different versus the 50% of what you think it is. And 50% is a fucking stretch without the steps. Does that make sense? Any questions or anything? Okay. I'm going to keep reading. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk. feeling ourselves justified. Here are the main reasons why we will relapse in recovery. Feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the alike. These are the co-signing bullshit that I will tell myself why it's a good idea for me to do this. But the reality is I'm just restless, irritable, discontent. And I can say that I'm going to do this, but if I was in fit spiritual condition, there's many of us who are in fit spiritual condition that go through jealousy. We go through fucking cheating, people cheating on us. We go through fucking hell. And we don't drink.
Yeah.
And we can do it, or death. And we can do it in a good way because we're fit spiritual. We can go through the loss of a loved one. We can go through the loss of, I know a person, Katie, is she online here? She just lost her dad, okay? She's been in and out of the program. Katie, I hope you're okay with this. She's been in and out of the program for many years. Real deal, okay? She finally clued into this illness after many years of in and out. She finally clued in to step one in the last 2 years. And then the solution and what are we looking for, the defective character, the cunning, baffling, and powerful aspects of our thinking. And she's dug in and grown like fucking no one's business. I've been a good pillar for her for the last year and a half. And she just went through the death of her father. And she went there and talked to him, and he went through the MAID program, and she was there to support him. And all of these things. And she's only between 1 and 2 years sober. But because she dug in so much and she's really fucking getting what we're laying down tonight and taking this to a high level, she's able to get through it. And I was talking to her last night, boom, things are just clicking. And without her father passing, without certain relationships failing where she would have drank, she's learned the lessons and seen deep, profound things about herself that she's been able to let go. And she's on this journey. And even when she was talking to her dad on the last time, she said, I saw my dad's soul. And he has his own substance issues, right? Or did. He's gone now. But she said, I saw my dad wants the best for me. I could see past all of the things. And she said it was just a moment that I couldn't fucking even describe. And she said, I called you, Bill, because I know you know. And I do know. Because the fellowship of the Spirit, here you will surely meet some of us as you trudge this road of happy destiny. But you got to do certain things. You got to abandon yourself to God as you understand God. You got to admit your faults to him and your fellows. You got to clear away the wreckage of the past. You got to give freely of what you find and join us. Bill W. said, here you will meet some of us as you trudge the road of the fellowship of the Spirit. What does trudge the road mean? Means fucking walk with purpose. What's the purpose? We fucking serve Creator and his kids. How do we do that? We do it with moral psychology. We go from egoism to altruism. And we just start somewhere and we do these things. And my life is rich today. Gord's life is rich today. I know many people's lives who are rich today. And life doesn't have to stay gray. And common sense thus becomes uncommon sense. The way that I ran life and that I thought life was, it's actually the opposite. Who would have fucking known? But
Maddening, really.
give her, Gord.
Oh, yeah. Where'd you stop?
I don't know where I stopped. I just went on a fucking rant.
I know you did. I was listening to every word, and that's why I'm lost now. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. Is that right? Okay. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him. He's slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he's hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car, the Calgary C train, hits him. And and breaks his arm. He tells you he's decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks, he breaks both of his legs. On through the years, his conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think you know what, guys? I have to tell you, I just read this with a young man this week who'd never read the big book before. And he didn't understand yet. He didn't get to the next paragraph yet. He didn't have this conversation. And it was all like, this guy's fucking crazy, man. And then the next one. You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. And this kid looked at me and went, whoa, dude, that's profound, man. And I was like, yeah, dude, it's pretty profound, eh? It was pretty cool because I read this book with a lot of people and most of them have read it at least once before, right? So it was neat to get that reaction out of him, that really realistic, sort of genuine reaction of, oh, wow, I get it. That was really cool for me this week. Just wanted to share that with y'all because it's true, right? I mean, substitute alcohol or your drug of choice. And we all behave exactly like this. I don't care where you live, what your story is. We all behave exactly like this when we're in it. However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. So I may be a great businessman. I may get awesome grades at school. I may actually be a pretty good dad when I'm not drinking and show up. And I may be great at sports or whatever my thing is. But the minute I start putting alcohol in my system, I go off the rails. I'm very, very different. I go strangely insane. It's strong language. Strangely insane. That's strong language, right? Nobody wants to think of themselves as different from their fellows. So when you tell me it's strangely insane, I immediately feel different than my fellows. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. But isn't it true? Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. That was me for so many years. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes that you fellows did, nor are we likely to. For we understand ourselves so well after what you've told us that such things cannot happen again, surely. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. Catch you later. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. So we read about those people, right? The normal drinkers and the heavy drinkers, the hard drinkers that could stop given sufficient reason, right? That's what it's referring to right now. But it goes on to say, but the actual or potential alcoholic with hardly an exception will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. So I can sit with a guy for 27 hours straight, explain this entire book with him, explain to him exactly in a way that he can relate to me, and he can go out and decide to do this thing without doing any steps, and he will be drunk again if he's the real deal. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Let us take another illustration. Do you want to stop or carry on? Do you want me to carry on, read the next story as well?
Yeah, let's try to get Fred out of the way.
Okay. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income's good. He has a fine home, is happily married, and a father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, It is Fred. To all appearance, he is stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of the jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. So he was in a spree. He emerged remorseful with a firm resolution to not do it again, right? For a few days, he was depressed, so he made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so. In spite of the character and standing character, Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. I've been there. I have thought, nope, I know my body in and out. I'm very in tune with myself, and I'm going to just figure this out on my own. I've actually said that. I've done that a couple times. I went to a doctor for some anxiety after my father passed away, and he prescribed me this medication. And I'm not against medication, okay? I'm not promoting or telling you not to do it, but I went to this doctor, and he prescribed me medication for these panic attacks I was having after my dad died. Back then, guys didn't talk about this stuff. So I talked to my doctor. He prescribed me this drug called Paxil. And I'm sure it works for some people, but it sure the fuck didn't work for me. It made things really bad and really worse. And apparently with that stuff, they try you on new stuff and you find what works for a guy and that's how you get there. But I went back to the doctor and I'm like, yeah, you can take these and I'm good. He's like, oh, we're just going to try another one. I'm like, no, I'm good. And I literally said to him, I know myself really well. I'm very in tune. I said these words. I'm very in tune with who I am and my body. I will figure it out on my own. And I went on to have anxiety attacks for another 7 years. I literally had to do this every time I had a panic attack. I would count my pulse to slow my brain down. And eventually I think I medicated myself with oxy so much that I didn't get them anymore. I don't think I ever stopped them, but I thought that I could do it on self-knowledge. I thought I knew myself. And that had nothing to do with the alcoholism, but everything to do with my ego, right? So I just want to share that with you. We heard no more of Fred for a while because Fred wasn't interested in what we were selling, right? One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all of his other concerns and businesses, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Good night, Bryn. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would only be a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard a work of this simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased, and my new partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. And as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. I think as we've learned, that's insanity, right? That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. Well, of course he did, right? He's taken one and now he's powerless. The allergy has taken effect. You're done. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty the next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital and unbearable mental and physical suffering. And so very much like Bill just said, we take one drink, we are not going to know where it's going to lead us. And neither did this guy. All right, I'm good.
Okay, I'm good too. What we'll do is next session, we'll just kind of recap this story a little bit. And we'll just shut her down right now. But thanks for everyone for coming, and tell your friends and bring some donations. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys.